Hello and welcome to the Hometown Church Podcast. My name is Jesse Roskamp. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm joined as always by my co-host, Pastor Deacon Ailes.
Hello.
And today, for the first time officially on the podcast, is Pastor Jeff Groen.
Hi there.
Deacon.
Well, you have made some guest appearances unintentionally
A couple
by coming
times.
into the prayer room.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I don't know that you know that, but I have walked in when the recording was in progress, unfortunately, a few times.
You're just drawn to it,
I'm
and we're
drawn
just
to
so
it.
glad you're here.
I've been drawn here.
Yeah, we had you on a couple times unofficially, so we figured we just have to invite you on once. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. So, today we are continuing our Spiritual Disciplines podcast series, and it's been really fun. I mean, I've not been there for a couple of them, for one of them.
We've
Just
only
one,
done
just
two.
Lewis. Yeah, that's right. It seems like so long, but I missed that. I wish I was here, but it's been a really good time just talking about how people grow in the Lord and stay connected and all that. Again, as we look ahead to the next year, people are thinking about New Year's resolutions, right? They're just thinking, how do I improve myself? How do I do these things? How do I lose weight? How do I, all this stuff? And we thought, hey, let's try to see if we can focus in a little bit more vertically.
Sure.
How can I grow closer to the Lord? How can I build that relationship up? And so that's what we're going to be doing over this series, and we're excited about it. So, over the last few weeks of the year here, we're going to look at some of these different spiritual formation habits. We had Brent talking about silence and solitude. We talked about fasting, and now we're going to talk about something I think that's really special. Seems pretty important to God, And so we're going to talk about the Sabbath and rest with my good buddy, with handsome man, Pastor Jeff Groen. Jeff, how are you doing today?
I am happy.
Yeah.
Really happy. Glad to be here. I'm excited. Grateful to be able to share a little bit today, but I am no expert in this area, but I have been experiencing it and experimenting with it. So what I have to share today, think of it as just an appetizer in the whole area of Sabbath. And there's so much more, but we'll introduce this. I'll share a few things that I've learned. We'll share from Scripture, and hopefully it'll maybe open up some doors or windows to something that for most of you seems really Old Testament-y and not very useful in our current day and age, but hopefully it'll come alive a little bit for you today. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah. The Sabbath idea is a strange one, a little bit. I mean, not in concept really, but it's strange in how we kind of interact with it, and how some people do it really well, some people do it really legalistically, some people don't do it at all, and it's something that we kind of put on the shelf a little bit. We talk about reading our Bible and we talk about prayer, pretty consistently, without any issues, and we have no problem saying you should read your Bible more.
Right.
We have no problem doing those things, but we don't talk about this one as much. So I'm really excited that you're here, that we can talk about it more. Yeah, as we dialogue a little bit. So I guess just to dive in, I'd love to see, where do we see the practice of Sabbath and rest in Scripture, and what purpose does it serve? Why does God say we should do it?
Before I get into that, I'd like to introduce the word just a little bit.
Yeah.
So the word Sabbath comes from the Hebrew word, which is Shabbat, which literally means to rest or to cease, to cease. And the context is almost always resting from work. In the Bible, for example, think of Psalm 46:10 in the whole area of cease striving. So kind of the old King James Version says, cease striving and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. So there's this notion of ceasing or stopping our striving. And it actually comes across in this passage as a bit of a cause and effect. So if you cease striving, if you slow down, you can and may and perhaps should experience God. After all, we hear this all the time. It was just shared recently. Deacon, I think you shared it on Sunday. We aren't human doings, but we're human beings. So I want to color this in a little bit differently. I think this is an area, a word that doesn't come across our lives very often. But I want you to think of Sabbath freshly as a taste of heaven. And imagine a French silk pie, and the French silk pie is something you'll get a chance to enjoy in heaven. And Sabbath is a taste of it. And if you think of it that way, maybe it makes it a little more attractive, a little more appealing. And hopefully over the course of the next, I don't know, however long we talk here, you'll get a taste of Sabbath, and it'll give you more of an appreciation for it and a desire for it.
Yeah, I do think that there probably will be French silk pie in heaven. I think I could, if you read between the lines a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good pie. It's a good choice. Yeah, I like that.
So a good biblical comparison for Sabbath is the word or the notion of tithe. In the Old Testament, the tithe, or giving 10% back to God, is commanded, but in the New Testament is generally encouraged and not demanded. And Sabbath is similar to that. If you look at the Old Testament, commandment number 4, so of the 10 commandments, they start out, think of it as a target or a circle. In the center of the target is God. And the first 4 commands have to do with God, and recognizing him and honoring him and loving him and celebrating him and remembering him and not taking his name in vain and so on. Then commandment number 5 is about your parents, honoring your parents. And then it goes out to others. And then finally, the 9th and 10th commandment are your neighbors. So it goes farther, but in the very center of this is God. And the Sabbath is commandment number 4. And this is what it says. Remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Exodus 20. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God. Verse 11, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and everything in them. But on the 7th day he rested. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. And I want you to notice that this command actually gives us a reason to observe the Sabbath, because God did it. In 6 days, he created the heavens and the earth and everything in it. And then on the 7th day, he rested. I don't get it completely, but that's what he tells us. And this is repeated, I guess it came first. In Genesis 2, 1 through 3, this is how it comes out. So the creation of the heavens and the earth and everything in them was completed. On the 7th day, God had finished his work of creation, so he rested from all his work. And God blessed the 7th day and declared it holy, because it was the day when he rested from all of his work of creation. So God rested before there was any sin in the world. So rest is not sin. And I think in our culture, we can consider not doing something, being unproductive, as wrong, maybe even lazy or sinful. But it is actually a healthy rhythm for living, and God is commanding us in these passages to live a rhythm of rest 1 day a week. So Peter Scazzaro is a pastor and teacher from New York City, and he's written a lot of different books. One is called The Emotionally Healthy Leader, and he has all sorts of emotionally healthy practices. And I would say that this is really some source material for us. And on page 145, I'm going to read a little bit later, but on page 145, he describes a secular or worldly rhythm of life. And he says most of us adopt this, and that is work, work, work. Work hard, whether you're getting paid for it or you're doing housework at home or you're parenting your kids or whatever. Work hard, daily, frequently, often, until vacation. And then when you get vacation, rest. And then go back and work. So work for months, half a year, a long time. And then you get a week or two off. And that's kind of the rhythm of rest that our culture sort of adopts. But what God says is, I've got a godly or biblical rhythm for work. And that is work 6 days. And then on the seventh day, Sabbath or rest. Work 6 days, Sabbath. And that's the biblical model for, or rhythm for living. If you take a look at the Old Testament again in Deuteronomy 5, verses 12 and 15, God repeats this Sabbath command, but for a different reason. It says, observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God. Remember that you were once slaves in Egypt, but the Lord your God brought you out with his strong hand and powerful arm. That's why the Lord your God has commanded you to rest on the Sabbath day. And in this context, he is writing to over 3 million Israelites who had just escaped slavery in Egypt. They were enslaved, and they worked every day, 365 days a year, for centuries. And God was saying to them that they were slaves to work before, but not anymore. God told them that through Moses that I rescued you from that life. Now take 1 day a week to stop from your labors. Rest and remember me. I am your creator. I am your rescuer. Don't forget me. And I think Sabbath is commanded so that we can stop and remember who our creator, rescuer, savior is. Because we can get so busy, distracted, that we forget.
Yeah.
So the word Sabbath shows up 107 times in the Old Testament, and it always refers to one 24-hour period where no work is done. And for the Jews, their Sabbath began at sundown on Friday, and it ended at sundown on Saturday. Now, in the New Testament, we see that the Sabbath is strongly encouraged, but it gives us more freedom. The word Sabbath shows up 60 times in the New Testament, and here are a few examples. In Mark 2:27, Jesus rebukes the legalist Pharisees, and he says, the Sabbath was made to meet the needs of people, and this is in the NLT, New Living Translation, and not people to meet the requirements of the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even over the Sabbath. What does Jesus mean when he says this to the Pharisees? Well, the disciples had been chewing on a few heads of grain while they were walking along. So just imagine yourself walking through an apple orchard, and you grab an apple and you start munching on the apple. Clearly, you're just enjoying a brief snack. But the Pharisees had devised laws that basically said if you were doing that, you were harvesting. You're harvesting the grain, you're harvesting the apple, and that's work, and that was outlawed. That was their legalistic perspective. And I believe Jesus was rebuking the Pharisees' small-minded Sabbath legalism and highlighting instead he was inviting us to see the Sabbath as a healthy rhythm for a balanced life. Man was not made for the legalistic traditions of the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was made for man to enjoy. Again, do you remember Jesus' sarcastic quip to the Pharisees in Luke 14:5? He says, which of you doesn't work on the Sabbath? If your donkey or your cow falls into a pit, don't you rush to get him out? He's perturbed here. And he says, let's be reasonable, guys. You know the difference between work and simply doing something that needs to be done. Use your heads. The Sabbath was made for the benefit of man and not a burden to weigh down your life. Don't you get it? So Jesus at no point says, neglect or ignore the Sabbath, but he tries to correct their perspective of the Sabbath. So do you want a healthy and balanced life the way that God intended, even before sin? Then practice Sabbath rest 1 day a week. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I think that's great. That's a lot to think about. Yeah, I think what I like is that you were calling out the issue that the Pharisees had in their hearts, right? We had another issue of totally missing the entire point of a thing and making more rules about it, and then getting to this point where they totally lost God in all of it, and they found another way to be self-righteous.
That's exactly right.
And Jesus comes out and says, you guys, you totally missed the point of this.
That's right.
This was made for you to enjoy God, not to beat people up about.
Not just enjoy God. That's a part of it.
Yeah.
But to rest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they missed it in all of their laws.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a few things that you said that kind of stood out there. One, the idea that rest is not a sin, right? Like this idea that we kind of feel like we're doing something wrong if we're not working and like trying and being productive. And there's kind of like a tension there, right? Because there is a lot of proverbs about the sluggard, right? The lazy person. Right. Don't be the lazy person who's letting your field go to waste because you're not doing all the work, right? And so there's a difference between being lazy and being restful, right? Taking intentional time to step away from your work so that you can be more productive when you go back to work and doing all this stuff, and doing that on a regular basis to keep God and the day holy, right? And the second thing that I really enjoyed that you said was the differences between the Exodus command for the Sabbath and the Deuteronomy command for the Sabbath, and how it gets connected to two different ideas, right? With Exodus, it's getting connected back to creation, right? That this is something that's supposed to connect us back to the way things are supposed to be. Right. And then in Deuteronomy, it gets connected back to the redemption story, the rescue story, the salvation story. And so it's this idea that we're connecting back to what humanity was supposed to be by entering into a Sabbath rest, by taking a day to remember God and to worship God, and to not be in this state of earning, right, but just receiving from God. So I just thought that was a really, really interesting idea, and how it kind of connects to those two different thoughts.
Yeah, and even how that points to how we might do this today, because of course, as we look at the Old Testament, God is always, don't forget what I did. Don't forget how I rescued you out of Egypt. Hey, this is what we're doing. And then
we
of course,
forget so quickly.
We forget so quickly.
Right.
And what's cool about the Sabbath is it can tend to help with that. But then now we as believers, and what Paul was doing, hey, don't forget, this is what Jesus did. Don't forget who he is. Don't forget what he's done, pointing back to our big salvation event, and how Sabbath can be this opportunity to kind of
opportunity is a good way to put
bask
it.
in that.
Yeah. I don't want to go down too many rabbit trails, but God commands us to remember him in communion.
Yeah.
He doesn't say, I want you to do this every day.
Right.
At noon.
Right.
He just says, when you meet, remember me. Break bread. Remember what I did. So he has a number of ways that he challenges us to remember who he is and what he's done. And Sabbath is one way of doing that.
Yeah.
Second rabbit trail a little bit is we have to sleep. Why did God design us to sleep? He could have said, eat, keep going, just like a machine. You don't need to rest. You don't need to sleep. But somehow there is this necessary rhythm we have to stop and recalibrate for a new day. God designed that, hardwired, and we try to ignore it sometimes. We try and stay up until 2 o'clock, wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Doesn't work for very long.
Mhm.
So there are rhythms that I think God has hardwired into us. And if we can just accept those rhythms, we're happier.
Yeah.
We're just happier. We're healthier. More balanced. So I wanted to highlight a little bit of history, Christian history, and then U.S. Law history. There's something called blue laws. And I'm going to read this out of Scazzero's book, page 153. It's just one paragraph. And it says this. Confusion around Sabbath goes back as far as the 4th century, where Constantine, the first Christian Roman Empire, dealt with Sabbath by legally mandating a day of rest for everyone. In the early years of the American colonies, so-called blue laws restricted various activities and commerce in order to accommodate the Christian Sabbath, which was Sunday. So blue laws basically were you can't buy alcohol on Sundays. You can't do certain things. Certain places were just closed on Sundays. These various activities and commerce were meant to accommodate the Christian Sabbath. The earliest Sunday closing laws date back to 1610. They included not simply the closing of businesses, but also, at least at that time, mandatory church attendance. So you can see how easy it is to succumb to legalism,
Yeah.
even now.
Yeah. 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 That's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because it's such an easy thing to make legalistic, but I think we also can get to a point as modern day Christians that we're so afraid of legalism that we just reject Sabbath altogether. And we're like, actually, we don't need to do this. We shouldn't be doing this.
I think the
because
tithe is like
We're
that.
gonna say
Yeah.
same with the tithe.
Yeah.
And same with so many things. Bible reading, prayer. Hey, if I just feel like I have to do that, well, it's going to ruin it for me. So I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
Or I'm not going to go to church
Yeah.
because I'm not into religion. But, it's not good to not meet together.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and so I really like how you said that it's really an opportunity, right? Because that's, I think, where we have to walk that fine line of like, we're not making this into a legalistic thing, but we're also not making this into a thing that like we should just avoid and forget altogether, right? It's still a good and healthy practice, one that God is like, I mean, he makes it very clear that he wants his people to be practicing this, right? Like, even in the command, right? All the other 10 commandments are like really short and to the point, and then the Sabbath one, he gives like a whole long list of like why you should be doing this. Remember to do this, and here's a bunch of instructions about it, which is just fascinating. Yeah. So yeah, I kind of want to get a little bit more into just your experience with practicing Sabbath. When did you start implementing Sabbath into your life, and how has that kind of developed over time?
So in the summer of 2019, we were introduced to Scazzero's Emotionally Healthy Materials as pastors. And I began to put the Sabbath practice into place on Thursdays at that time. So for the last 5 years or so, but it's been fits and starts for me, partly because COVID hit our world March of 2020. And it's taken me some time to experiment with the Sabbath. And for other people in my life, in my surrounding life, to change their expectations of me. In some ways, we expect people to be available all the time, almost 24/7. We'll text people at 8 o'clock at night and say, XYZ, did you do this? Something like that, and expect a response in 5 minutes. So for me, letting others in my circle know that Thursdays is my Sabbath has taken some time. It's taken some time for me to try and figure out how to make it work. So Thursdays, I literally stop working. Unless there's an emergency or some very important seminar or a commitment on Thursday that I cannot escape, I don't answer any work texts. I don't look at emails, and I don't answer my phone. Often, but not always, I will even turn my phone off for a whole day.
Is that legal anymore?
Is that possible anymore?
Yeah.
There's something freeing about not having your phone on. It's not vibrating, and you're not immediately responding to it. So anyway, that this is just something that I've been learning as I've been going. Often, let's see, I suppose I enjoy a consistent Sabbath about 45 out of 52 Thursdays a year. So most Thursdays, but not all Thursdays.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess what I feel like that'd just be like a really challenging thing to do, to have other people adjust their expectations for you.
You're right.
Would you say that's been the biggest challenge of implementing this practice?
Yes. It works for me in particular as a pastor because there are rhythms of operations at church. And it turns out, for example, we have a small group on Tuesday night, youth and so on, go Wednesday night. We have a lot of things that happen on Saturdays. Of course, Sunday's busy. So just for the life of the church, I'd say most pastors take Mondays off. That's probably the most common day for pastors. But I like getting to things and responding to things on Mondays and sort of catching up. So for me, Thursdays works. I get a lot of stuff done on Wednesday. I try and connect with everybody that I can. And then my email will actually say, except there was an update recently and I haven't been able to get it back on. Used to have it every Thursday, but it would say that I'm not available until Friday morning. And then on Friday, I get to it again, and usually I'm able to get to everything that needs to be done by the time Saturday and Sunday roll around. So it's worked, and I would say if everybody in your office had a different Sabbath, you'd be in trouble.
Yeah.
You couldn't do that. I'd be happy to adjust my Sabbath if everybody decided we're going to do it on Mondays, for example. I would do that. But because I think I might be the only pastor at Hometown that practices a consistent Sabbath, I've been doing mine on Thursdays, and I think most people know that, expect that.
Yeah. Has that been hard to, just with today's day and age,
Right.
With how not only do we have that sometimes crippling expectation that we need to get back to someone immediately,
Right.
We can place certain things on ourselves. Hey, this is an opportunity. Hey, I have more time, so now I can do more work. Has that been challenging for you as you and your sweet wife Sue have worked to implement this, to shut out a lot of maybe the noise that maybe you were accustomed to doing every day?
That's part of the next question that you have.
It sure has.
Is it
sure
okay
is.
if we ask it and then I kind of get into it as we dig into that?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I got one more question,
yeah.
kind of in this section.
Yeah.
Of just kind of like what does a typical Sabbath day look like for you if you're not working?
That's a good one.
Yes, that's also part of the next question. If you don't mind.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
well,
I guess
let's
that
just
works
pop into the
pretty
next
well.
question of like what effect has practicing a Sabbath rest had on you as a
Okay,
person?
those are great questions.
Thanks.
We'll get to them.
Yeah.
All right. So Scazzaro, again, he describes Sabbath with 4 characteristics. And they're expressed in different ways in Scripture. They aren't ever listed in this kind of order in Scripture, but I think they can all be supported. So he describes them as stopping, number 1, ceasing, cease working, resting, delighting, and delighting is maybe the one that isn't as clear in Scripture, but I'll try and share a little more about that later. And then God. So if on your Sabbath you can aspire to cease striving, you can rest, you can delight, find things that you totally enjoy and do them. And you can prioritize God or spend some special, unique time with God, then that would be a healthy, awesome Sabbath. So stopping. This is a 24-hour period of time, 1 day each week. And 24 hours makes a lot of sense to me because that's the rhythm of our lives. We have 24-hour days. So this is both paid work as well as unpaid work. So this would be the hard part for most people: yard work, household chores, house projects, Doesn't mean you can't do them, especially if you enjoy them. But I think that's what, for most people, that's what Saturday's for, or during the week. So you work, you go shopping, you do chores, you do projects, you try and get most of that done Monday through Saturday. And then Sunday is a time to stop. Just stop. Then the next characteristic or aspect of Sabbath is rest. And this is anything that replenishes or restores you. It's waking up later, maybe sleeping in. It's enjoying a slower pace. Maybe it's a longer shower. Instead of being in there 5 minutes just to clean up and get going, it's basking in the warmth and saying, oh, this feels great. It's taking a nap. The key is rest from both paid and unpaid labor. Rest. And then the third aspect is delight. And this is the one that I like the most, and I'll just describe it to you. Remember when God said in Genesis 1:31 that he had finished his work of creation, and he said it was very good. I think there was a joyful satisfaction, maybe even a celebration of accomplishment that went with his finished creation. I think Sabbath is a time for enjoyment, for delighting in creation. So one question I would ask all of you to make is this: what gives you joy? What do you delight in? For me and Sue, right now during our empty nest season of life, this can mean a number of things. So it might be different based on your season. But often we have our date nights on Thursdays, or we might have a date afternoon because lunches are a little bit cheaper. But it's just having some time together where we'll go out. We may use a coupon, we may not, but we just try and enjoy going out and doing less at home, less cooking and so on. We'll go out e-biking often on Thursdays if the weather's nice. Thursday is often a day for grandkids, and they're truly delightful. Just being with them is a joy, and finding consistent time to be with them is also, I think it's good. It's healthy for them and healthy for us. Maybe trying a fun new recipe in the kitchen, but not rushing to get a meal on the table, kind of enjoying it. Perhaps doing it together. So this is where I'll say, all right, Sue, what do you want me to chop up? And she'll give me some stuff and I'll chop it up and we'll work on it together and try something new. Maybe just holding walks around the block together. If I were younger and I had young kids, this would be my family pizza and movie night. It'd be Thursdays. This would be the day we take to go boating or tubing and skiing, or we'll go to the water park. Honestly, I would do my best to make this day, the Sabbath, my family's favorite day of the week, if I had that freedom, if I could. And then the fourth aspect of Sabbath is God. It's a day to rest, dedicated to the Lord. And for me, this would be undistracted time with God. And you'd think as a pastor, I can have undistracted time with the Lord anytime I want. But it's helpful to not have any timelines or to-dos I need to get to, because those to-dos can be very distracting even for me as a pastor. So this is a time for reading a devotional or a book, going for a prayer walk. It's often extended prayer time. Just walking at 9 Mile Creek, which is near our house, and gawking at the beauty of God's creation and praising our Creator. So stop, rest, delight in God. And these don't always get equal attention every Thursday, but these are things I aspire to experience on my Thursday Sabbaths. And one other aha from my Sabbaths, I realize that I am not as important as I think. What do I mean by that? I don't have to be at the center of things all the time. When I step away from work for a day, I sometimes wonder what might get dropped or what am I missing, or I also don't want to disappoint anyone. But I have to realize that God is in control, even when I am not. Everything doesn't stop because I drop out for 24 hours. I can do some things, and I have some responsibilities, but I also have limits. I can only do so much. I can't do it all, and I shouldn't even try to do it all. So stopping for a day helps me realize how small I am and how big God is. And honestly, this day helps me to enjoy life a little more and to remember God.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. I like especially your last point, just how you framed that, hey, we're not as important as we think we are.
Right.
And I think what that does is it can tend to help us to put God in kind of in a better spot
Right.
in our eyes as we just wait and we say, hey, God is not depending on me like maybe a boss would be depending on an employee saying, okay, hey, if you don't get this report done, we're in hot water here. But if that's the phrase, I said it, I'm like, I'm not confident now. But
I get it.
But God can work things out
regardless
regardless of whether we have our phone on or not. And I think that's really important for us.
Yeah. One thing I've done fairly recently, or started doing fairly recently, is called parenting your phone, where you give your phone a bedtime. And so turn off my phone, put it in a drawer, and it's done for the rest of the night. And kind of at the beginning, there was like this anxiety, like, oh, what if someone needs me? And it's like, and then it's very quickly you realize how little you're needed after 9 o'clock at night, you know?
Yeah.
It's like there's hardly ever anything that is like so desperate that people need to get your attention at that time. And so it's just like, oh no, people can wait to hear from me, you know? So having that consistent reminder that you're just not quite as important as you'd like to think you are, this is awesome.
I think Sabbath can help you get there. Because you're not accessible, but you're literally stopping, and you're realizing, wow, I'm so finite. And I think it does give you a chance also to think what is important and what's not important. It can help you to prioritize things, and often for me, it helps me remember the relationships in my life and how important they are, and it's really easy to let those go in the busyness of life.
Yeah. I also wonder if, as people experience your lack of availability, if that helps them to kind of say, yeah, maybe this thing isn't so life or death right now. Maybe I don't need that immediately. And I wonder if, as we rest and as we try to lean into that, stopping, resting, delighting, God, we position ourselves to where others can see how that affects us. And it's another one of those practices that people are kind of drawn to say, hey, maybe I should consider something like that. Because this is there's that book by John Mark Comer, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. We went through the material in our small group. I'd recommend anybody go through it. It's super, super good. But
good.
It gets into these things too. And you just see, even in my own small group, how we all, me included, struggled. Like, oh man, we've got so much going on. Why do we have so much going on? We build our lives around doing things, getting things done, accomplishing things. And our day seems better if we've accomplished more things. And so then we measure ourselves and we measure our days
That's exactly
based on all the things we've done or didn't do. And if we didn't do them, then we're terrible people, And I like the way Sabbath seems to
reset that.
Yeah. Break that up and change your mind on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Reset's a good way to think of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So we've talked about it, what it is, when you started it, how it's affected you. Now, let's say we have listeners, which I think we do, which is cool. Watchers.
A couple of them at least. Yeah.
Yeah. how would someone who maybe has heard the concept of the Sabbath
Right.
or the word
Right.
and has no other idea, they think that's some old, archaic,
Right.
Old Testament thing.
Yep.
How would they implement this into their lives? And then maybe you could talk to, are there pitfalls
Sure.
that come into some of those things? I'd just love to hear your perspective on that.
Sure. Well, I'll start out with, in some ways, my own journey a little bit. As a pastor, my schedule's unique. And other than 1 or 2 hours on Sunday morning, my time is flexible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very unique. What that can mean for many pastors is that they are available 24/7, and ministry can become a pastor's mistress. You'll often hear that. Or the doing of pastoring or preaching or shepherding can become our identity. And I want you all to know that there is no end to ministry and people needs in almost every church. There are more ministry issues and people needs than any one pastor can meet. So early on as a pastor, I worked way too much. Initially, I put ministry and other people needs ahead of my wife and my family, and that was not good. But I've realized that having co-pastors to share the burden is an amazing privilege and joy, and not all pastors across the country have co-pastors to share the responsibility and joy of leading a church. And I do work probably an average of 50 to 55 hours each week as a pastor, which is fine. But enjoying a Thursday Sabbath has positively rejuvenated my pastoral life. I am not running on fumes. Sabbath has helped my cup to overflow and my family to feel loved. So what about you? You guys most of you aren't pastors. When should you Sabbath? And I want to start with this. Anytime that works for you. Anytime, any 24-hour period that works for you, I think, is just fine, but make it consistent. But I do like the idea of Sundays for many people. So I just want you to think about this. Because on Sundays, you're reminded about God at church. Every Sunday you go to church, you're remembering God. You're remembering who he is. You're being reminded of his goodness, and you're reading scripture. So there's definitely contemplation of God going on. I think it's a natural and rhythmic remembrance of God. And I think that's partly what the Sabbath Sunday is designed for. I'd also say that Sunday naps are heavenly, aren't they?
I don't know. I have 4 kids.
Yeah, well, you don't know.
I agree. They're amazing.
Yeah.
They are amazing. You can
Sounds
take a
nice.
Sunday nap and just feel like, wow, was that wonderful? Wake up from it. You don't even know what day it is sometimes. I suggest shutting off the phone on Sundays. Maybe reflect on the message over lunch with your family. Do things that you enjoy together. Go biking. Go for walks. Try not to do household chores if you can. Try to prepare for your Sabbath by doing those things on Saturday, or saying to yourself, next week, Tuesday afternoon, I'm free. I can do it Tuesday. But trying to free up your Sabbath for enjoyment and for rest. Maybe do some board games, or this is your pizza and movie night as a family. Truly rest and enjoy in such a way that this becomes your favorite day of the week and your children's favorite day of the week. Imagine if they don't have to do homework, or you even discourage them from doing homework, and they enjoy the day with you. Now, if you start this in their teens, it's going to be a little bit hard just because their circle is so much bigger. But if you can do this when your kids are young, I think they might look forward to and offer you ideas for Sundays, and it might become fantastic.
Yeah.
It might become fantastic. So what do you guys think of that before I end?
Yeah, I think that's good. We all of our kids have like list items. Okay. So after the morning, they have things they need to do, which is, getting ready for the day, brushing their teeth.
Yep.
They have a little job they do after breakfast, then the afternoon list is the big one. That's where
Yep.
they have a number of chores that they have to do. And then they have some bedtime stuff to get ready as well and make sure that we're not all leaving the house a mess and wake up to a big mess. And so Sundays, we've just said on Sundays, we don't do lists. We don't do it. What
Okay.
that usually means is that I do more cleaning, which I'm fine with actually.
Right.
I kind of enjoy certain cleaning jobs, and not the ones you'd expect. But the kids love that. Like they love that. They love that they don't have to do their lists, and they tell us that. But so yeah, there's things like that I think are really key. One thing I would say too is, so I have an iPhone. I'm sure Android has something like this as well, but Apple has a really great do not disturb menu of things, and you can create custom do not disturb menus that say, hey, if someone needs to call me, because I never get calls anymore unless it's probably like a pretty big deal. You can say, okay, I want calls to come through. And you can even, if I'm remembering correctly, you can say, I want calls from this person to come through. But otherwise you just don't get notified about it. You can only allow certain apps, things like that. So that might be a good thing.
Sure.
Hey, this is one thing that would be restful for me, but these other ones wouldn't.
Turn off aspects of your phone.
Yeah. You can turn off notifications for
Sure.
things, and I do think it's probably better by and large to just remove it from yourself in general. But if that's a hard step
Yeah.
to
Right,
take, maybe
right.
this is a good first step
Right,
to
right.
to do some of those things. Yeah. Other things?
I think that's good. I think making it your best time of the week, I think is something that is really resonating with me, and it makes me think of, I think it's from that not emotional health, the ruthless elimination of hurry, where
All right.
he talks about his experience with Sabbath and how they'll always start it with a meal with the family, and they'll talk about their favorite thing, their highlight from the last week with the family, and he jokes that his answer is always last Sabbath. And so the kids always are like, make fun of him because he always says last Sabbath is his favorite time of the week, because it's just like, that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a time of enjoyment and delight, and where you just get to just take the weight of everything that's going on in life off of your shoulders, and just be free for 24 hours. I think is such a wonderful idea.
I think it's a place you can cultivate hobbies too.
Yeah.
We just don't have much room in our lives for hobbies. But if, in fact, you might be thinking right now, do you have any hobbies? Maybe you had a hobby before you were married or before you had kids or something like that. But it is an opportunity to enjoy your hobbies and not feel guilty about it. Maybe your hobby is Scrabble. You just love playing Scrabble or whatever. But cultivating those things so that life is richer and deeper.
Yeah, I think one key step is to become a fantasy nerd, like myself, and then you have a bunch of books you can read. That'd be great.
Okay.
Right? Wouldn't that be a great way to do Sabbath? Yeah.
My thought process went straight to fantasy football, and I'm like, you're gonna spend a whole day just playing fantasy football? Just
Yeah. Nope.
no, just books.
Fortunately, Thursday is not a big football day. So
It's not.
Yeah.
Well, there's Thursday night football.
There is.
Yeah, that's good,
But
good day
you
to
might-
set your
I was
lineup.
going to say, but you might enjoy that. That might be
Yeah.
restful for you to be able
No,
to do
it's
that.
just stressful.
Okay,
It's just
so
stressful.
Don't do it then.
Yeah.
Don't do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, right.
But I like the idea of just like reading.
Yeah.
I enjoy reading, and I want to do more like reading novels.
Yeah.
And I think that'd be a cool thing. Like I've been thinking about reading Lord of the Rings for the first time.
That
so,
might be a
like,
place to do it.
Yeah, just having
3
time to like
hours?
sit and
Set aside for that.
what's that look for?
For the first time.
I've never read them. No,
You watch them.
I've watched them.
Jesse,
I've watched them a bunch.
middle name, Roskamp. I don't know your middle name, but
Oh, yeah,
no.
right.
What is your middle name?
Lol.
Lowell. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Dang, that's a manly name.
Lowell.
Yeah.
Jesse Lowell Roskamp.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome.
Now
Anyways.
a lot of people know my last name.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
middle name.
Yeah.
Can I end? Can I
Yeah.
bring it
Yeah, we
back
can- we
here?
can-
No,
we
hold on.
bring it
I need to
back.
camp out on the Lord of the
All
Rings
right.
thing a little bit. Yeah.
Well, let me end with this. In the Bible, eternal heavenly rest refers to a place of peace and freedom from our current earthly suffering after death. Heaven is described as a place where we will be resting from our labors, where there will be no more pain, no more sorrow, no more toil. Think of the common gravestone words, rest in peace, rest in peace, R.I.P. The clearest Bible verse on this is Revelation 14:13, which says, "And I heard a voice from heaven saying, write this down. Blessed are those who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, they are blessed indeed, for they will rest from their hard work." This is somewhat mysterious, and we will not fully grasp it, I think, until we die, but I believe that a weekly 24-hour Sabbath rest really is a taste of heaven. And I want to encourage you to try to taste this and offer this taste to your family, to your kids, and then they'll have something even sweeter to look forward to in heaven, heavenly rest. So thanks, guys, for inviting me. I've had a lot of fun kind of remembering the source of Sabbath, and then maybe even refining and rethinking Sabbath, because I think I can drift. So this has been really good for me. But thanks for inviting me to share on this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and coming on and joining us. This has been awesome.
Yeah.
It's been a real joy. So yeah, that's all we got for you today. Thank you, Jeff, again. Next week, we will be finishing up our spiritual disciplines with one more TBD. But
It's a surprise.
It's a surprise. It'll be a good one, though. It's going to be a lot of fun, and that'll actually be our last podcast for the year. We're going to be taking the last couple of weeks off with the holidays, with Christmas and New Year's.
Sabbath rest.
Sabbath rest, yeah.
Well, now you're getting into like a sabbatical, which is completely different. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll have Jeff on next week. On
sabbatical.
Talk about sabbaticals. Yeah. No, but yeah, it's been awesome. We're looking forward to next week. Hope you can join us. If you're watching on YouTube, know that we've got audio versions of this on everywhere that you get podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you're listening on one of those, know that we have a video version of this up on YouTube. If you have any comments or questions, please send those in to us at podcast@Hometown Church. Or if you have experience with practicing Sabbath or any of the practices that we've talked about so far, leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube, or send those stories in to us. We'd love to hear from you and love to hear from your experiences too. That'd be great.
Maybe there's something helpful that you do that we didn't talk about, that you just said, oh man, this was a game changer for me. We'd love to hear that, and I bet other people would too.
Yeah, that'd be really good. So yeah, thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.
See ya.
Adios.
Wow.